All right. Thanks for being here. Beth Pellino-Dudzic, writer, rock and roller. What's your usual day of writing go like for you?
Well, I have also another job that I wake up to, which is housework and that type of thing. So that comes first, along with doctor appointments. I take care of my mom. Usually, mid-afternoon, I sit down at my computer and I write into the evening. Make dinner in between that, but I find the afternoon and evenings are, for me, the best time to write, because in the mornings there's just too many things going on, and I have not stopped writing. Right now, before we started the show, I have the third book that's going to be released, and my editor gave me a few, hey, catch this, catch that. And it's not really the first round of editing, but she looked at it and she said, you might want to make these changes. And I think she should know me better, that if you give me that, I'm going to give it back to you within a week, which I did. And I have to send it to her and my publishing consultant. So the late afternoon evenings are my sweet spot, because I can just think and I'm not interrupted. I find it very relaxing. I put on my spa music and I just sit and write. I actually do not have a problem with writing. I had to step away from continuing the series to get book 3 ready, because the choice is, do I keep writing the story or do I get ready to publish my third book? Third book is always going to take precedence.
And it's the third book in the series.
Mm-hmm.
So how far ahead are you? How far ahead are you in your writing?
Book 4, book 5, book 6 are written, and because they, as a romance writer, they tell you anything between 88,000 words to like maybe 95 is the sweet spot. I unfortunately write very long word counts, and book 6 was like 170,000 words, and I know they're going to say you have to cut it. So it's not really cutting it, it's pushing it over into the next book. So I do have part of book 7 actually written, and I know where the story is going to go. So I'm going to need 7 and 8. And the only reason it's that way, I would have loved it to be 6 books, but the other ones would have been a little lengthy, and they don't like that. Your editor and publishing consultant says, no, too long. So I just shift everything over. So I'm very much ahead of the game. I know where I'm going in the story. And actually, Sunday or Saturday, I was doing some housework and I thought of a scene for book 7. And I was like, okay, well, that's going in. So I'm constantly adding a scene, making the story continue on. And that is not a problem for me.
Does it help to have the story figured out for books farther than you've published or you're publishing, or because you can go back and change things? Like if in 3, if something you wanted to do for 7, you could go back and change it right before it was published.
Right.
How much
And
leeway do you like for that?
I actually did do that. There was a character in book 2 that was introduced. There was already an antagonist in book 1, and he shows up. And my marketing person told me how much she hated that one character that I introduced in book 2. And she said, "I hate him." And I said, "Good, you're supposed to hate him." And she said, "I think you should make him more creepy." And I thought about it and I said, "Oh, I can make him creepier." So when I went into book 3, I did make him creepier, and there are other things that happen that I have now gone back and changed some things up. And that, of course, will go into book 4. I'll have to add the little creepiness of this person. So it's great because yes, you can go back and change things and say, okay, when I went into book 6, it was this, but I can go and change everything now. And I think for me, that's great to be able to do that.
Do you have things in the books that you are publishing or that have been published that are like storylines that you have an idea of but haven't thought it all the way out yet so you can connect them when you get to those later books? Or do you have it figured out before you publish a book?
I have it pretty much figured out. And that's the thing. I thought of one thing that I should have added in book 2 and I didn't. And there's no way you can go back, right? Once the books are published, they're done. Unless, you could do a rewrite, but that's a very expensive proposition. And being a self-published author, an indie author, is expensive all by itself because you're paying for everything. So, this for me, the storyline evolves, and sometimes it evolves as I'm writing it. I'll say, "Oh, let me do this." It's just, I guess, because the story has been in my head for 20 years, and now I'm actually sitting down and writing it. It has taken on a life of its own, and I will say that there are moments when I'm doing other things that I'll get into the lead female character's head, and then I'll think of a storyline or something she says or does because I'm actually living the character, if you can understand that. And so when there are sad things that happen, like there was a scene that will come out in the later books, and it was a very sad scene, and I started crying like I was actually living that moment. So for me, it's kinda easy. I don't know, it is.
Yeah, I think it was Thoreau. I think it was Thoreau that said, "No tears in the writer, no tears in the reader." So, and I get the idea of you're putting pieces in that. I mean, that's how it makes it real. I think if you were just imagining everything, well, even if you imagine it, you can still make it true and real. But when you're dealing with a character and you're trying to make them more creepy, for instance, do you put yourself in the position of that character and try to think what their motivations are? Or is it just from the other view of other characters where you're like, if I can make this character or get this character to do something that they would find creepy? How do you approach that?
I think you have to, do I get in the head of the creepy guy? Yes, because I know what his motivation is. And so the 2 lead characters and the rest of the people in the storyline, every single one of them are touched by his creepiness. But it is the female and male lead that are actually most affected by what he does. So I can get into those 3 characters' heads and kind of play them off of each other and how they would react to him. And then as I stretch it out, because if I just focus it on the 2 main characters, okay, but it does affect other people in the book. So that's added into discussions with the female character's parents and the band and how it affects them. So it's like tentacles that reach out, and you have to make sure that you tie those people who are affected by it into that thread of the story. At least for me, that it has to be that way. Because if he's creepy to her, then the way the story is written, he's creepy to a lot more people. Does that answer your question?
Yep, it does. So then when you're writing in your afternoon, evening writing, do you always write in the same place or move
Yes.
around, or it doesn't matter? Same
No,
place?
I write in the same place. The only time I'll shift is if, the dog wants to sit outside in the yard, and then I'll take my computer and sit in my screened-in patio, and I'll let her sit out in the sun, and those are the only 2 places. I will say that when I travel on Thursday, I will have my computer, and I'll be writing in the airport, or hopefully my editor will get me back to me, and I do have my book cover design that should be done this week. So I'll be working on the plane, working in the airport. I'll be one of those people that I never thought I would be one.
How do you take notes normally when you're out in the world if you don't have your computer?
It for me, it's a mental thing. It's if I'm in the house, like I've written songs in these books because it's about a rock band. So yes, they do covers of certain songs. That's what the female character is known for. She opens up with a cover, but they do write songs. So if I'm going to make it real, then I need to write lyrics for songs, which I have about 14 right now. And I know 2 other songs that I need to write, but I need to get to that place in the book to write them. So if I think of a just like in the middle of the night, it usually I have these journal books, and I'll show them to you, that I get from my therapist's office, and I must have, oh, 2 dozen of them, and for every book, it's like me jotting down, either a song or something that I want to happen that I just thought of, and I do write, lyrics for songs in the books, so it's scribbled out, but if I get an idea and I'm home, I'll write it down so that I can get back to it later that evening. If I'm out and about, I usually it becomes like this, I don't know, mantra or this voice that keeps saying, when you get home, you need to write this down. When you get home, you need to write this down. So um, that's the way I take notes.
How do you organize them then when you after you get them in the book, and whether they're in one book or many books, in their older ideas or newer ideas, how do you organize those to be able to put them in a book and use them?
Well, actually they're scribble. And if anybody else would see it, they'd be like, "Well, I don't get it." But I know that I have for book 1, book 2, and there's usually 2 of them, and I just scribble things down. So for me, I understand my notes, but if anybody else would see it, they would say, "I don't this is totally out of control." But for me, it's very much in control, and I'll write down tour dates, right? Because they go out on tour. And I start jotting down the location, the dates. And because the first 2 books have take place in a different era, a different time, I had to research things like was the Olive Garden around in 1984 and things like that. So I'll write down, no, that wasn't, and in the beginning, I've done research. I do research as far as still, if they're going to be doing a tour, I need to find a venue that makes sense and a hotel that makes sense. And it sounds really trivial, but you need to have the realness, the reality of those things. Otherwise, it's not authentic.
So then, do you ever make up those, like make up a hotel name because something's going to happen there and you don't want to aggravate the Marriott? Or
No, I actually do use, because I've asked, can I use this? Can I use that? When she does covers, for instance, say she opens up with, I'm just pulling this. She doesn't open with this song, but Can't Get Enough of Your Love, right? It's Bad Company. I can write the title of the song with no problem. I don't put who sings it because I just assume that everybody knows, although my editor didn't know that yesterday, because she keeps me on my timeline, and I put the song yesterday in, and she said, that song didn't come out at that time. And I said, Cheryl,
Hmm.
yesterday came out in 1966. So I think that my timeline is great. So you can use the names of songs as long as you're not writing the lyrics of those songs. So that's completely public domain. Hotels, I have used the actual names, and in I don't know if I think it's in book 4. They go to Hawaii, and I did live in Hawaii for a rather long period of time, and I put in the 4 seasons because I used to go there quite often with my children, ex-husband. And when I told my daughter I was putting in the 4 seasons, she goes, "Are you sure you want to do that?" I said, "It's totally fine. I can use the name of the hotel. I can't, I don't go into detail. Like, say there's a restaurant, I don't name the restaurant. I just kind of leave that they're going to this place. Um, but I am careful, and my editor is also a proofreader, so she will let me know what is okay to put in and what's not. So yeah.
When I put songs in, I don't think I put them in books. When I put them in scripts, I usually put, if you're putting a track recommendation for a scene, then you'd say whatever track, something like whatever song it is by whomever you're talking about, knowing that there's a bunch of different people that have done that song, and you could do an instrumental version, or you could do it a different way from different types of people. It's strange how many songs we think are by a particular artist that are really remakes or written by someone else or done by
Ab-
someone else.
Absolutely. I mean, you have to know music. And it's funny when you say write scripts because my marketing, I call her my marketing guru. There was a online class that she wanted me to take for screenwriting because I do believe that my series would make an excellent limited series on some streaming network or whatever. She does have a client that HBO is interested in her series. So she said, this would be a great limited series. And so in my head, I'm going to be finished writing the books at some point, and I will love to jump in and hopefully I don't know, sell it and write the screenplay with help. But take that class, learn things, because the story for me, the books are personal. The one thing that runs through the books is that there is a lot of my life in the books that are fictionalized, but there are certain moments that are really me, and there are things that I have said, things that I've done. So for me, the books are very personal, and I've seen many adaptations from books that have made it, whether it was a movie or whether it was a limited series, and they change things around. So they'll change a character's whole personality, and I'm like, I it's a sacred thing to me, so I don't want to put it in the hands of somebody else totally. Can I use help? Absolutely. I don't know what I'm doing, but I'm a fast learner. So yes, I would be wanting to do a screenplay to make sure that somebody doesn't wreck my story.
Yeah, I think two good examples of people that have maintained a large amount of control of their creative work is probably J.K. Rowling with the books and then going to the movies, and then Jewel with the way she did her music rights and just listening to interviews from them. And then you hear it from other people too, where I don't one of the Eagles was talking about, I mean, you hear that in the behind the music stuff where they're like, you need to get the rights to your music. And then people get aggravated at them that are in the band because they think that they should have the rights to the music too, that they didn't write.
Yes.
And it does make sense that if you're a band and you created this thing together, that everybody has, I don't know if you'd say equal share, but why not equal share in it? But I can see as a writer if somebody else is like, oh yeah, Hotel California, yeah, I played that on the album, so I should get money every time it's played. And then if you wrote it, you're thinking, I mean, is that the same thing as somebody that just played the bass on Hotel California versus a person that wrote it and arranged it?
Yeah, that is a very interesting point, and I will say that in my book, that they're very much, the female character writes lyrics. She says, I can't write music, and one of the band members is her cousin, and then there's her, I don't wanna give anything away, but I'll say her love interest and 2 other band members. So she will sit with them and say, "Okay, here's the lyrics. I want this to be a very hard rock kind of vibe for this song." So they collaborate, and they're very much a collaboration. Now, the truth is, I read a very good autobiography. It was Pete Townshend's autobiography, and he goes into how he was the one that was writing the music for The Who, and Tommy and a lot of other things. And the other band members were kind of looking at him because he said the money was in the rights to the songs, the music, and they weren't they weren't directly writing it. He was. So that's where a lot of tension, if you know anything about the band, it's like they kind of all didn't get along, and one of the reasons was that Townsend was the one writing all the material. If you look at the Beatles, it's kind of the same way. Lennon and McCartney were writing the songs, and George Harrison was there raising his hand saying, "Hey, look, I have some songs." And they were like, "Yeah, yeah, well, we will get to it. We'll get to it." And as they progressed, there were some George Harrison songs that got on there, but yeah, I mean, think about those things, and it's true. Um, for me, hopefully my songs, there's a band or some bands, and I will be happy to share rights with them, because all I'm doing is writing lyrics, and if they want to put the music to it, I believe in sharing, because the only thing I'm not going to share is the books itself, because I own everything right now. I own everything. So somebody asked me, if a publishing company came to me, would I go there? And I would say probably not, because right now I own everything. I have the other stories written. Yes, I'm probably going to tweak them, because as I went to the next book, I changed things around. So that means, it's domino effect. I'll have to change the other parts of the story. But why would I? Because I have met people at book shows and book author signings, and they have given their book to a publishing company, and they don't get much for it. So why would I do that?
Yeah, I've not had that experience where Penguin has swooped in and said, "We'll give you $1 million for your manuscript for this thing." So I haven't had to make that decision. I'm not sure what I would think. I know that when you enter poetry or other writing, short stories, to magazines, if a magazine says we want the rights to it, I don't do that, just because it feels like that's yours,
Mhm.
and you
You're
lose
giving it away.
control of it. Although I think when you write a story and it's done and you release it into the world, it's each individual's story now. Like somebody's going to get something different out of it than you got from it. They might get the same thing, probably something different. So I understand that, the idea of that creative source that's then working through you and then out in the world. But with script writing, I've found it is much more collaborative than anything I've done. And then like writing music or being in a band had its good collaborative efforts as a kid. So I don't remember all of it, and we weren't famous. So that probably made it easy. And then writing a novel with somebody else was, if you get the right person, it's a great experience, which I had a good experience writing novels with another guy. And then writing a script, it gets torn apart by everyone. So unless you're going to be that auteur, or somehow you've had this best-selling book that you're turning into a script like J.K. Rowling, and you can exercise that control over it, then everybody's going to put their little twist on it. So the screen writing that you do is probably going to turn into something else along the way if it ever gets made. So it's a difficult thing, but I think you
Yeah,
just look at it for that.
I would expect it would. The only reason somebody would pick up the story is because it has blown up, or it becomes something. Obviously, nobody's going to pick it up if it's just, another romance novel. So it would have to be, blowing up in order for somebody to want it. But I have no problem, especially on a screenplay, to be collaborative. Um, the things that I have noticed with novels that have been made, they'll make a character who's just a regular character, and then they turn them into being gay when in the book they weren't gay, or they'll take on this whole other kind of vibe. And I'm like, wait, that was not in the book. That's not the book that I read. And then it completely turns me off, because the the powers that be said, no, we've got to make this like this. And all I can say is that in my books that were in my head 20 years ago, the characters as I saw them, and they're a diverse, and I'm not playing into the diversity thing, but my characters were already diverse, and that's why it's like, no, you can't change them because their diversity plays a part in the story. So you can't change that up. And yes, I mean, J.K. Rowling, great for her. I mean, for me, that would be a great model that I would not want to give up 100% of my control. Understandably, especially with screenwriting, yes, you would have to work with other people. I'm okay with that. And music, as far as I think the best bands do collaborate, right? They'll be like, okay, they get a song and then they jam it out, right? And so the drummer and the bass player and everybody adds their bit. And that's the best way to do it musically, is for everybody to put their stamp on it.
Yeah, the variety. I like the variety. I'm glad there's bands that have the free flow and work together like ZZ Top seems to. And
Mhm.
then there's other bands that don't get along at all, but the music is still good. When you hear those stories, it does affect your listening to the music. So you have to say, you have to try to separate the artist from the music at some point and go, do I still want to listen to this and get some pleasure from it? Or did I know too much? Which is a good explanation of don't meet your heroes because they're probably not
Mhm.
what you think. So it's
I've been in that situation where I've met people from bands and it was like, "Oh, yay," and then you meet them and it's like, you are a jerk. And it's for me, and because I've been around club bands for a good, I'd say from 16 into my 20s, I was in the whole music scene. Not me personally, which I should have done, but did not do because when you're younger, you, for me at least, didn't think I was good enough, didn't think I was pretty enough because that was a thing. And so all my friends were musicians. I lived with someone who was in a band, so that was, and then you're known as so and so's girlfriend. It's like you don't have a personality, you're so and so's girlfriend. And so musicians were a big part of my life. Should I have done something? Possibly, yes, but I was too afraid, and so I didn't do it. And then when I was and I was in the music scene, and I was also, going to college, and said to my parents, "I want to go for acting," and they laughed at me and said, first of all, I was supposed to go to the University of Buffalo, which was on the other end of the state in the corner, far away from my parents, and my father being that Italian dad, and they paid for everything for me to go, and at the last minute, my father said to me, "We live, New York City. You can't find a school here, in Westchester, you can't go to school here." And I said, "No, the idea is that I wanna move out of the house and be far away from you guys so I can." And, 2 weeks before I was supposed to go, he said, "You're not going to Buffalo." So I did end up going to school while moving in with a much older musician boyfriend, and said, "Okay, well, they're not gonna pay for me to go for acting." So you say, "Okay, I'll go and take business administration." So, then life changes, but the creativeness for me always showed up. Whether I used to give the biggest parties when I lived in Hawaii. My ex-husband was very well known in the business community, so my creativity went to, she gives the best parties, and every year, I would always have different themes. And so when you're creative, as you are, I'm totally getting that, you can only thwart the creativeness, right? Okay, I didn't sing, I should have. Parents didn't want me to act. Okay, so I'm going to put my creativity, whether it was parties, whether it was helping somebody plan their wedding, honestly, um, or interior design. All those things were just so easy for me because the creative thread in my soul was there. And my stories, and I do have 3 other stories that kinda jump off, I say jump off the shelf, that say, "Hey, what about me?" And I'm like, I'm not ready, go back." Um, so they were coming to me in, like, these black and white vignettes in my head, and about a year, no, it was longer than a year and a half ago, I'll say under 2 years, this particular story started, like, ramping up in my head, and I was cleaning my house, and the story started coming to me in color and names of characters, which with the black and white vignettes they didn't have names, they didn't have backstories. And I went into the shower, and this is, it sounds corny, but I turned the shower on and the story flooded through me. It was like, okay, this is her name. This is where, this is how it's all going to happen. And I ran and got my laptop and said, okay, I'm going to start writing it. And that's what I did. And I haven't stopped writing because that creative force that's within you, and not everybody has it, right? Not everybody can do those things. Um, you can put it down for only so long and it does come out. And so for me now, it's come out in writing, and I'm happy about it. I think I'm pretty good at it. And it's just, you're supposed to do something. As a young girl, I knew that I was supposed to do something. And whether it was singing, acting, now it's writing. Um, that's my way. That's how I'm going to do this, hopefully be popular. Um, and people say, "Well, why are you writing for yourself?" No, I'm writing for this series to become something that people love. And it's a romance, so it's basically women. Um, and the story is dirty. There is some R+ rated scenes in there, but women love to read that. And that's, just to put it out there. There's romance conventions, and I'm going to a couple. I'd like to go to more. And they're either called steamy or smutty. That women want it. And these conventions sell out, and the tickets are like $350. And there's 2,000 women coming because they want to read those books. And they'll go with a shopping bag and buy like 20 books. And so for me, like, that's my genre. But then you add in the rock and roll part, and I know about music. So I write like I know about music. I've lived part of that. So you hope to get the people who are into music too. So, I just know something's going to come of it. I know that sounds pretty ballsy of me to say that, but I do believe it.
Yeah, you find those things and then you write about them. That's good advice for any writer, is to write what you know. And then you get better the more you do it. That there was always the advice of, to write well, you have to read a lot. And I can appreciate that a little. everything in moderation, even moderation. But it's everybody can take a different path to what they're going to do, and there's probably an audience for whatever you write. It's just the hard part is finding that audience. So the more esoteric your topic is, the harder it's going to be to find that audience. But yeah, rock and roll, that's good stuff. People like to read about that. People like romance. So of course it's going to be, those are two good roads to go down.
When you sign up for these conventions, or I did a bunch of book festivals last year, which I'd love to go to a couple of them back. But my business manager is like, let's focus on the romance conventions. And sometimes I have to tell him, no, I don't agree with your choice. But people ask, what's your genre, right? So I say and you could say either steamy, spicy, smutty, rock and roll romance with a lot of intrigue, a lot of plot twists, and the mob is part of the book also. That is an aspect of the book. And I speak to it because I know of it, which growing up, you never talk about it. So my father's gone for like 11 years, so I feel like I can open that door a little bit into that world, because it does play a part in the stories. So I wrote what I knew, and it is fiction. So, but I can put those little stamps throughout the book of things that I knew, things that I lived, and people have said to me, it's like, I felt like I was in the room with these characters, or and that's exactly, or when somebody says, "Oh, I hate that character." It's like, "Good, you're supposed to." Or when somebody says, "When I read the book, I cried at that scene." It's like, "Good, you're supposed to cry." So when you get that kind of validation, it's like, "Okay, I'm on the road that I should be." And as I said, for me, when I go back and read my work, I will cry, even though I know I wrote it, even though I know what's going to happen. It still elicits that emotion. And somebody said to me, if you are living the characters, then you're writing the right way. And I said, all right, I'll keep doing it. So I've been living with these host of characters in my head for a year and a half. So it's okay. I enjoy them.
Yeah, it's always interesting when you get two characters that you've been writing, and just as an exercise, and I like writing exercises, just as an exercise where you put two characters in a room and just see what they talk about. It's pretty cool how that works out. And I think that's that creative force that you've recognized how to interact with it, and maybe it recognizes that you are interacting with it, so you get a little more from it, and you learn how to deal with it as time goes on. So I do like that part of writing where you may have planned it out, but there's also a certain element of discovery where you go, oh, I didn't realize that was going to happen. Or you have this issue in your writing where you think, I wonder what's going to happen next. How does this work out? Or I need a scene about this thing, but I don't know how it's going to go. And then the solution just presents itself to you at some point. And it
Yes.
might not be when you're sitting at the table to write. It might be when you're going for a walk, or, cooking, or doing whatever
Right.
else. And then you gotta capture it.
Exactly. And it was funny, when my marketing guru there, I gave her what I call the first draft of the third book. And she said, you know, I hated this character in book 2, and now he's in book 3. She said, you know, I hate him. She said, you know, creep him out a bit. And so that opened up a beautiful storyline for me when I said, okay, yeah, I can make him creepier. And that became a storyline that I wasn't going down that road, but now that I have, it's a great storyline, and I matched it up with something else. So now that's gonna go through the other books too, and didn't think about it, and I know where I think the books should end, and now I'm rethinking, a certain part of that ending will have a little bit of a twist that I wasn't planning on, but I thought about it and I said, yeah, I could that would be entertaining for people." 'Cause it's almost like the female character is gonna come full circle and realize something about herself that she never thought was that she never thought she was.
Discovery. It's good writing. When you're talking about script writing and taking classes about it, it's because I've taken some writing classes and then written some books, written poetry, written songs, music and lyrics, and then script writing is the most recent thing I've started trying. I think it definitely affects all the other things because it's a stripped down version. Like even in prose writing, I like a stripped down version. And then script writing is even more stripped down than that. And it focuses to me more on dialogue and that classic show, don't tell thing that people always say you need to do when you write. That in a script, it's easier to do that because that's what you're doing. You're writing directions or suggestions for a director of how to get this scene across, like all those little things that you can visualize. And when you talk about party planning and interior design, all of that is vision. And people could have it if they developed it, but maybe they're just not interested in it. They're interested in other things. But if you develop that vision and then you put on top of it writing, then that's a great combination, I think, for writing because you can picture everything and then you're trying to describe it to someone else in a unique way. And yeah, I think trying to write some of your stuff in a script format would be useful, even if you don't use it as a script, but just write like a page of it. It's a whole different language. I used to think with a book, why do I need to write? Why do I need to adapt it for screen? It's right there. It's all right there. All the person has to do is just make a movie about that book. And then you read some scripts of shows you've watched or movies you watch, scenes, and then you see how it's on the paper versus how it's on the screen. And you go, wow, it's definitely a lot of collaboration. It's a lot of individual tweaks. I can see why it's important to have good actors, good directors, good sets, and all that. Like you recognize a bad movie when you see a bad movie.
Oh,
And
yeah.
if that's what you're trying to write, then okay. If it's not, then what feel are you going for? And the script stuff is exciting. And I think if it makes you excited about writing again or more excited about writing, then doing all those little exercises are worth it. Even if you just look at a textbook and look at writing exercises and do one a day, one a week, whatever, that's fun.
Yeah. Well, uh, I'm interested to take this class, and it's funny when you sit. One of the things that my books are, they're very dialogue driven, and that's why they're so lengthy. That's why it's 8 books, because I'm putting you in that scene with those people and what they're talking about. Is there narrative? Yes, a little bit. For me, there's nothing worse. And I read this one book, and it was 50 pages of narrative to get to a point. And I said, oh, this is terrible. But my book is very dialogue driven. So you're like in the room with them as they're making these decisions. And I tell you, okay, they are in New York, in this place, da da da, and then go. And there is a point where the book does have a lot of action in California, and then I'll say, this is the place, this is the way the house looks. So when I mention it again, that, the two lead characters are sitting on the couch looking out their window and there's the Pacific Ocean. Yes, you get it because you know where they are. And it's them talking about whether it's their music or their relationship or whatever. It's so dialogue driven that I want you to feel like you're there. And I set up the scene for you. So I'm hoping that I can take a little bit of the way I write just normally and take a few screenwriting classes and try to adapt it. Do I think yes, because my stories are dialogue driven, that it would be easier for me? I don't know. I know there's like, okay, there's this, you set up the scene in their house and, Montecito, California, in their houses. And then when you think about it, it's like location, location, location. You better have a darn good locations person finding all these places that they're at and filming it.
Yeah, you could approach a script from the perspective of, where am I going to set this to where I can reasonably and most affordably make it? Or you can say, I'm not going to worry about all that, and I'm just going to do the settings where I think is best for the scene. I think both ways are good depending on what you're going for. And my experience with script writing is, you have to learn the language of it, the format of it, so you can keep going with it. Otherwise, it gets frustrating because it just takes a long time. And when you look at script writing softwares, I started with those, and then I was like, man, I don't understand enough to use the software because I don't know the language of script writing. I don't know when I'm going to capitalize everything, where I need to put it on the page, what's the industry standard for it. And I think that's why it's better to just get a script of a show you like, read it while you're visualizing the show. For me, Seinfeld was a good one.
Oh,
and then
yeah.
Movies You Like is a good one that you can, if you look at a scene. Breaking Bad is really good, and you can read it and you go, okay, this is a lot different than I would have written to explain this
Right.
scene. It's a lot less words. And when you talk about dialogue, I think one of the reasons it makes dialogue better for me was that you want dialogue that's real. So you're saying it out loud as you're writing it.
Yes,
You
I
want it
do.
to be you want it to be conversational. You have to know the specific cuts, whether you're doing a J cut, a L cut, whatever, to overlap what the camera is seeing and what the person is doing. And you take out all those words, like they said sarcastically or whatever. You take all of that out and it's just the words. So it's going to depend on the actor of how they read it. It might come out with something different. It might be the exact same thing. So you got to trust that the situation is going to inform the person of how to act. And some actors are better than others. So you got to take that into account too.
Yeah.
So if you're the director, and the director matters for sure, because they're giving them that vision based on these set of instructions that you've written in a script. So I went from doing the script writing software because it was so slow to me. I do think once you get the language of script writing, pick a software and stick with it,
Okay.
that I just started doing it in Word. And I read some books about script writing, looked at some other scripts, and there's a bunch of differences between them. There's an industry standard for sure, but
Mhm.
there's some minor differences on if you're going to put in like a heading every time you switch a camera shot, or you're just going to capitalize shot and say, this is what it's seeing at this point. Like, what makes it easier to read for you, I would go with. And you get that understanding based on reading other scripts and looking at or remembering shows or motion pictures that you liked. And I think you then develop your own style with it. And the advice you'll get from people in the industry that I've gotten so far is use a script writing software and stick to it, and don't worry about trying to figure it out on your own. But I'm having a lot of fun with the figuring it out on your own and thinking, am I going to put in parentheses the person's action? How am I going to justify that on the left or the right? Just the position on the page. What do I want the page to be more blank space than words? What does page count really mean? Is a page really a minute, or is this scene a half a page and it's a 5-minute scene? So there's a lot of different things to think about. So I'd say pick a perspective, either that you're going to make the movie or you're going to get someone else to make it. So you want to make it in the scenes that are the most affordable and easy to find, or you're not worried about that. Pick one of those and then stick with it the whole script. And then also you're going to find your own style of how you want to set things up on the page. And I think from just writing poetry and prose before, I look at dialogue in scripts more like poetry than writing in a book. And I think that's what makes it better, because it has a tone and pitch to it that people are attracted to, because you do have to put a little more thought into it than just a regular, this person said this person said that. And it's, it is halfway between talking and poetry, I think. I think poetry is a little more than dialogue and scripts, but that's how I got into scripts to begin with, was writing a book and getting tired of the he said, she said, he said, she said, all the dialogue tags. And I was like, what's a better way to do this? And then I looked at plays, like when you're in school reading a play, Julius Caesar or whatever, and you
Mhm.
have the part and what they say, and the part and what they say. And I'm like, okay, that's good. And you could read that easily if you were determined to read that. And I know dialogue tags are supposed to disappear when you're reading a book, but I hated putting them in all the time. And I wanted to be able to tell the difference between the characters based on what they said and how they said it. And I think that transfers over well in script writing. And then you're putting the dialogue center page, the person who's saying it is right above it. It doesn't have, on very rare, maybe not rare, but not so often, like if they're going to say it as loud as they can, then you have the person's name as loud as can in parentheses, and then whatever they say. But you're centering it up, you're looking at the line and measure of it. And instead of a paragraph of words, you're starting to go, well, I want this sentence and then this sentence under it and then this sentence under it, this sentence under it. And it looks like a stanza more than it reads like a
What
book.
you're saying, yeah. Um, I guess for me, again, I go back to that. I'm living the story. So when the female character is upset, instead, I'll say she she blasted her. You have to kind of, instead of the he said, she said, or they said, you have to set it up in dialogue. And I do read out, like the female character especially. I'll write it, and then when I read it back, I'll say, no, she wouldn't say it like that. So I'm not gonna. I so then I speak the line, and I'm like, okay, well, she would add this word in, and it's usually a curse word. Um, because that's the way she talks. So I do clarify in how each character is feeling at that moment, so that you understand that the lead male character has got some issues, and he has many issues, and so I need to tell you before he says anything on the page where his head is at. So when you read the line, you understand he's this or he's that. Because if you just make it, he said, and so she says this, and, he replied, you're not getting the powerful sentiment that's behind that line that I've written for you. I want you to understand where their head is at as I set it up. So I'm setting it up with a certain thought process of the character. And because it makes it more authentic. If you're gonna read a story, and I have read several books. I used to do a book club, and there were certain writers that the ladies loved to read, and some of them, by the way, were pretty lengthy. So when I get this feedback back, I'm like, I read a couple of romance books that were over 400 pages. So, but anyway, and they were relatively clean, let's just say. Mine are not, and setting up that kind of scene is, I think that's the hardest, because you say, well, how far am I going to go in this? And I write it like a woman wants to read it. There's certain words and certain things that women don't want to read when they're reading about a love scene. So you have to set that up. And it has to be believable. And that's kind of hard to do that. And I had an editor tell me in book 2, she said, you need to add another, love scene here. And I said, but there's one 10 pages before. And she goes, no, add another one. And it's like, okay. And then you're like, well, what can I think of that they haven't already done, but I have to, set that mood up. And really, love scenes they're fun to write, but you have to make sure that you're putting them in the right place, that it has a meaning behind it, and that it's not, it's like movies. We go to movies, we know that there are going to be love scenes, but it's like, is it gratuitous sex scenes? Like, it doesn't add anything to the story, so why are you putting it in there? Just to have it in there. So I try not to do that, to just have it in there. And when I read book 3 back, as I was making these tweaks, I was like, I can take this scene out, because this happened, 10 pages ago. I don't need to rehash it. So that, yeah, setting up a love scene is it's fun, but it's also, make sure you're making sense with it.
Hmm.
Yeah.
What's the best way for people to follow your work?
I have the woman who does my covers, does my website. I have a website, perfectionsaga.com, and on there is a little blurb about the books. We're putting a teaser for book 3. I write a blog. We just started doing that. I have a newsletter, so people can sign up for that. And all the podcasts that I've done that have dropped, there's been a lot that hasn't yet, are all on my website. And there's a link that will lead you to Amazon, where my book is paperback, and then of course there's ebook. And it's also, if you go, it's not in the store, but if you go to barnesandnoble.com or certain large bookstores online, you can find my book there. But as we all know, Amazon is the way that everybody buys their books.
Yeah, I can appreciate Amazon. All right. So your website and I think your Facebook and your Instagram are in the show notes. So if people want to check those out, there's links there for them.
Right. And I have 2 Facebook pages. One my marketing person set up, which is my name, author, which is great. And then there's my original Facebook page, which I had to hide family pictures. I have 3 daughters. They're adults and they're like, "Mom, they don't want to be part of any of this." They're like, "We want you to be famous and successful, but we just don't want our faces out there." So I totally made my Facebook page professional. And on my Facebook page, it has all my links to Instagram, Threads, X. I have a YouTube channel, TikTok. I used to make a lot of TikTok reels, but for me now, it's more important to get behind the blog, the newsletter, and because I'm editing the book, that just takes your time. And I do like doing TikTok reels, but it has to be something that, hey, I'm going to be doing this show. I'll be in this town. I'll be signing books. That kind of thing makes sense on TikTok. I'll probably, when book 3 does come out, I'll probably do a couple, but I did do a lot of TikTok reels, and I finally said, I don't need to do them as often. And it's amazing. I did not realize that TikTok was actually a dating site for some people. So I was a little shocked by that and did not, deleted in any of those people. It's amazing that once you join, like on Facebook, I join author groups and book groups, and everybody's trying to sell you something, right? Everybody's trying to sell their thing. The artist who does my book cover, she is actually an artist. This woman's done thousands of book covers. She's the best. And somebody hit me up on Facebook, through like one of the author pages, and said, "I love your book covers. They're captivating, but I do really good book covers." And I said, "Thanks, but I have, and I do need to mention, I have a team. So when I say I'm self-published, I am, but I have 4 women who work with me, and I don't want to say for me. They do get paid, but we collaborate. I have my publishing consultant, and she is the best in everything that you could think of. Then I have my editor, and she kind of introduced me. It was like I interviewed a bunch of editors and picked one. So I have a great editor. I have a great book cover artist. She formats my book. She does my website. And then I have a great marketing person. And they've all worked together before. So it's sort of like I have the A team of people, and they know it's like, okay, book 3, we all get together, and they're there for the longevity of the series. So it's a wonderful thing, but it is a very expensive proposition doing it the way I'm doing it, because I want quality. I mean, I could download the book if I wanted to on Amazon, but no, I want quality. I want it to be special. So if I want it to be special, I better be having the best people working on my project. That's the way I'm dealing with it.
All right. Well, your links are in the show notes. Is there anything that you wanted to talk about that we didn't, or any thoughts in closing?
Well, just a little tidbit, and I mentioned it to you before, that there are scenes in the book that really did happen. Some things I've changed people's names because I had to. There is, I am through the books, me actually as myself, run through the books. And that kind of titillates people because they're like, well, is this fact or is it fiction? Because I weave kind of my story into the female character. So if people are interested to read my books and say, is that really her or is that fiction? Some people are amused by that and want to read it because of that. And I've actually done podcasts where I was asked if a certain scene that they brought up to me was true or not. And I always tell people, if you read my books and you want to know if that was fiction or if it really happened, I will tell you. But you have to read the books. And I will do virtual book clubs. If a book club wants to read my book, I will do a Zoom and answer their questions. If people write my books and they want a signed copy, I have book plates. All they have to do is let me know, give me their address, and I'll mail them a book plate and they will have a signed book cover. I mean, I always feel that if you're going to read my books, then I am going to give you, a book plate or a Zoom meeting. Why not? It's just, if you're taking the time, then I take the time. That's why I look at it.
Okay. And the best way for them to get in touch with you then is on your website?
On my website, and then there's a email address that they can send me a note, or they, of course, with Facebook, they can Messenger or Instagram direct messaging. And there's so many ways to get in touch with me.
Okay. Well, thank you very much for your time, and I'll
Thank
talk
you.
to you on the other side of this musical exit.